Hi, hello. I'm Joerg Reisig. I'm an indie game developer from Berlin, and I want to talk about the climate crisis and video games, and basically how the topic is handled by games, and why we should treat this topic with much more passion than we actually do at the moment. As an introductional example, it's a good thing to show the current state of climate change video games is Anno 2070 from Ubisoft. It's a classical new approach on a classical German city island building game where it's put into the future, and instead of islands you colonize former mountain ranges in a world that completely drowned by rising sea levels from a future climate crisis. The problem is the climate crisis is just not I don't know, thrilling backdrop to games, but it's a real actual problem, and that's why I made this talk. So, this is a screenshot from Spec Ops: The Line. I worked on this game for many, many years, also at a Berlin studio at Jager, and it's set in the region. It's set in Dubai, in a city that is completely destroyed by a sandstorm. It's a surreal military shooter about military horrors and the relation that we have with military shooter games. And in the end, in the game, basically everybody dies of thirst because the sandstorm just engulfs everybody that you actually wanted to save. So it's kind of awkward for me to to be now in a land in the region that, if you look at the prognosis of climate change at the moment, will have really serious water shortage problems at some point, and already is one of the driest countries in the world. It's a bit awkward because we made like this fictional product, and it's, even if it was very, very extra, it has this like huge permanent sandstorm and everything, it still had like a tiny look into the future. And that's scary, but it also gives me hope that video games can tackle these topics. And even if they go for extreme measures like a complete flooded Earth or something like this. So, who am I talking about climate crisis in video games at all? I'm making myself a science fiction simulation game called The Family Paradox, and it's a civilization building game. You have like little species that start in the earliest Stone Age and goes to become a huge spacefaring society. And the challenge, the mid-challenge in the game is before you can build spaceships, you have to overcome like the exploitation that your civilization does on an industrial level on your planet. So if your planet gets destroyed and gets consumed by your own greed of your own society, you won't be able to fly to the stars. Or if you fly to the stars, you maybe leave behind a dying planet. And additionally, I'm a game design consultant for the company that makes the sequel to Fate of the World, probably one of the most famous climate crisis simulators in the world. I'm not the most best person to educate you about the climate crisis. There are much more efficient and better people for that. But if you for some reason are unsure why this topic is important or what the impact of the climate change actually is, come after me to the talk, and or write me online, and I can hope I can educate you on and send you some information. Okay, let's go a bit back for a second and talk about the history of video games and climate, because it's nearly as old as video games themselves. The first game I actually played in that direction was Rainbow Warrior. It was on the Commodore 64. It was a game made by Greenpeace, and it had a very simple arcade mode in the game where you have to destroy these like little hairspray bottles that try to destroy the ozone layer, and you have to try to prevent that. And it was a very simple mechanic to show the problem of the hole in the ozone layer back in the days. But the most prominent example is Sid Meier's Civilization. Really early on, they had a climate change feature in their game, in their end game, where they had like this strategy game with like many factions competing against each other. And if just one faction polluted the world too much, then it changed the climate crisis event, and fertile land turned into desert, the coasts got flooded, and it didn't matter which faction it was. And that was like a very powerful tool to learn about the climate change problem through play. But the game that influenced me the most was Fate of the World from Red Redemption. That's really a climate crisis simulator. It's a simple card game, but it's based on scientific models, and you play around with the simulation, and with playing around, the player learns a lot about the really complicated connection of all the climate change issues. I can really recommend it. When I was working on my game, I would look up a bit on future trends, on current trends, and just pick 3 things that I see at the moment, how this topic is handled by video games. More commercial video games. I'm not looking so much at educational and indie art games at the moment. One thing which I see more and more often is kind of simulation strategy indie layer, where we have like more complex simulation mechanics. As an example, I put here Imagine Earth for my friends in Berlin, the Sirius Brothers, and they introduced in their science fiction planet building game complicated topics like carbon trading, which I never understood, and through play I could like now understand how these mechanics actually work. That I found very interesting. Otherwise, we have like kind of a bit more arty metaphorical approach, where we have games like Sea of Solitude, also from Berlin. I post all the games from my friends here, I'm sorry. Where you have like this kind of sunken city aesthetic. So you have a sunken civilization, a drowned city, where like you have a little person in a boat striving to the city, and it shows you more on an art level the loss of civilization and what will happen if you don't counter this crisis. The biggest commercial thing which we should mention, and which goes in a very interesting direction, in the multiplayer direction, is Civilization 6. In his add-on Gathering Storm, many players have to compete with each other, but also kind of cooperate with each other to prevent climate change. And that's what the current global problem actually is. It's a game theory problem. Everybody in the world has to reduce their emissions, but if some people don't reduce their emissions, they can have an advantage over other people. And that is really shown in that game, and that is a really interesting approach to show the current problems that we are facing. Lost my time. The time is okay. Yeah, that was a really short overview over like the games that were built and are currently out there. I want to like put a part of things out there, how game developers today can look at this really serious topic and try to bring this more into an interactive medium. The first thing, which I think is really important, is games are excellent tools to teach systems. And the climate crisis is primarily a systemic problem. So not everybody knows the structural dependencies of the climate crisis, and also not the side effects that the solutions that are actually on the table will have. So I will really encourage everybody to make a game that engages player and really show the structural problems that we have. And in games we can have in a playful and experimental way play with these issues and see how they play out. And that works also with really minimalistic situations. A good example here is Mini-Metro from Dinosaur Polo Club. There's my slide. Okay. The second approach, and that's like, I would say, the classic approach that many video game developers do, is the dystopian approach. So let's just show what will happen when we don't do anything against climate change. Let's show a world that is kind of basically gone to hell, and where dystopia, where we have like a kind of post-apocalyptic setting. The problem with this post-apocalyptic setting is they are often kind of handled as cool and edgy. So you add mutants into it and giant robots and whatever. It does not really explore the theme of like the despair and emotional tragedy, what happens if we lose our civilization, or most parts of it. A good example here is the really depressing city building game Frostpunk that is built in a complete, set in a complete frozen world. You have like one of the last cities there that tries to survive there, and you have to do a lot of bad and worse decisions to handle this. But, and there I come to my last point, is not. Doesn't matter. Then we come to the last point, is that me as a science fiction game developer always think that science fiction has the power to show us a scenario where we actually found a solution and where humanity survived. Games can give us a vision where we and our children can come out of these global crises. But also, that's a problem of science fiction. Game developers often, when they imagine future societies, take the easy way out. They invent some miraculous technology that will just save everybody, and that is, in my opinion, not the best way to tackle the situation, because this wondrous invention is like not on site, and we're kind of running out of time and have to find like a political solution. So we need to design a future where global society manage to stop climate change via political or cultural means, and not by like some technological Deus ex machina. Change the slide. Okay. Then I do the quote without the slide. I want to end this talk with a quote by game developer Pre-Code about how games are good tools for imagining a better future. She said in her article, "The Future I Want to Live In," she said, "We can design futures that leverage all our unique and individual strengths and talents worldwide. Where do we start? Our corner of the world is video games. In video games, we can create worlds that we actually want to live in." So, then I'm at the end of my talk. So please contact me online, please look up our game, and do you have any questions? Yep.
idea for a game.
Mm.
I saw this War of Mine, I think that's the name of the game, right?
Mm.
Where, this family trapped by, I forget, World War II, probably, but like they're
No,
civilians.
no, it's a quite recent war. It's like the Bosnian Wars. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm about that. But it's all about just the civilians and
Yep.
the stuff they have to do to survive, and the fact that there's no good choices anymore, right? Because of the aftermath of the war.
And it's a war game with all the cool war stuff. So like there's no soldiers and whatever. It's just surviving. Yeah, yeah.
Right, so is that kind of what you're talking about, like a dystopia, but not with the mutants and robots and whatever?
Yeah, this War of the Mind would be another really good example for this. So sometimes I see the term scarcity punk. Scarcity punk. So you really embrace the setting of a world that is less, that just has less people, that just has less stuff, has less resources, and show how people struggle by it and what they all lost and what they will forgot and how will they blame their ancestors and like said, okay, you fucked that up and now we have to live in this shit world and sometimes you can also like go the other way and go like, I don't know, cozy catastrophe and everything is like, okay, the world is ending and we're having a big party anyway and you fucked this up, but we have like our little corner where this is what sometimes zombie games do. So like the world is overrun by zombies, I don't have to go to work anymore, yay. But I think the series of the topic, you can, with this like light-hearted approach, also still touch people. I just recently played Flotsam, which is a super silly game where the entire world flooded, and you just build a city out of trash. So like the plastic trash from the world survived, and you just and you build these trash islands, and you have like little funny people running on these trash islands, and you have like cute seagulls who has like sea trash around them, and you collect them as pets, and it is super funny and it's like horrible at the same time. And if you find that edge, but I think that is really hard to do, and many games like fail in that direction. So, and many people don't try to trust this because it's not fun. Frostpunk is a really good game, and the War of Mine. This War of Mine, it's a really good game. It's really not fun, but it's engaging, and that's what we are looking for. But yeah, I think strangely that topic I don't see that often. So like, hey, let's show a world where we solved the climate crisis, where we had where we solved issues, but we had to put in political means. We had to restrict some things. We have to have like a huge carbon tax. How will this affect people? How does society looks after this 30 years afterwards? And that is an interesting part, and that's I don't see much in video games. And I think now when you do a science fiction game or a game that is in the future, you can't imagine a game without climate change anymore. So either you have to show a game where the solution has happened, or you have to show a game where stuff goes really bad. And you can't just, we're in the future and somehow that was solved. I think you can't do that anymore. And I see it more and more in games. You see it even in military simulations. If you played Arma 3, it's like a pure military simulation, and with this military game mindset where they put everything so in detail, they show their islands how, because they're set in the near future, how they have like wind machines and solar panels and everything, because they don't want to show a post-apocalyptic world, they want to show modern current world, so they have to show how climate change was avoided. And that I found super fascinating, because that even in such a genre, people have to think about it now. And yeah, that was